Good morning and welcome to the hearing regarding UAP disclosures. For too long, the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena, commonly known as UAPs, has been shrouded in secrecy, stigma, and in some cases, outright dismissal. Today, I want to state clearly that this is not science fiction or creating speculation. This is about national security, government accountability, and the American people's right to the truth. I've spoken now to a number of whistleblowers from the military, to include the infamous Eglin Air Force Base incident that occurred when myself and former Representative Matt Gaetz, as well as Representative Burchett, followed up on a lead from multiple active duty Air Force pilot whistleblowers that alleged that the United States Air Force was covering up UAP activity at Eglin Air Force Base. We have heard from a number of whistleblowers, specifically military pilots, that the reason for not coming forward publicly is out of fear that speaking out would cost them their flight status and potentially their careers. This is unacceptable. We cannot protect our airspaces if our best trained observers are silenced. We cannot advance science if we refuse to ask questions. And we cannot maintain trust in government if we keep the American people in the dark. Now, Congress has tried to fix this problem. If we set up offices and oversight bodies only to let them become graveyards for testimony, or worse yet, ruses for pretending to investigate when in actuality there was no follow-up, then we are not doing our jobs. In recent months, Congress has also been presented with evidence that points to technologies that, to our knowledge, are beyond our current capability. And the witnesses today are not alone. In fact, they're far from it. In fact, 34 senior military, government, and intelligence officials have broken their silence. This includes now Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Senator Rounds, Senator Gillibrand, General Jim Clapper, the former director of the government's UAP task force, the former head of aviation security for the White House National Security Council, the former Secretary of Defense, and many more. Again, to quote Secretary of State Rubio in an upcoming documentary known as The Age of Disclosure, even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis that begins to spin out of control. And to quote Senator Gillibrand, who also went public in this documentary, it's not acceptable to have secret parts of this government that no one ever sees. It's time for the fundamental truths of UAP to be revealed to our nation's leaders and the public.
I submitted a detailed written statement for the record, and we'll go into a lot of that here. But the public has been told over and over since the late 40s, there's nothing to worry about here. These mysterious craft seen by millions of people in the skies, in the oceans, over the land are not real. They're not a threat. The witnesses are wrong. They're crackpots. Don't believe it. That changed for me. What got me hooked is the paper trail. Documents that were squeezed out of the U.S. government after the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, became the law of the land. And those documents paint a much different picture than what the public, the press, and Congress have been told over many years. The documents from military and intelligence personnel behind closed doors admit that, quote, these things are real. They're not fictitious. They can fly in formation, they're evasive, and they outperform any aircraft known to exist, including ours. The public, of course, as I said, has been told something much different. Back in 1989, I reported about a guy named Bob Lazar, who claimed that he worked at a facility dubbed S4 out in the Nevada desert, very near to Area 51. He said he was part of a reverse engineering program. He said there are alien craft that will be taken apart to figure out how they operated out there. And that was a pretty tall order. I had clearly taken a dive into the deep end of the pool there. But in the years since then, I've interviewed dozens of other people, and I've detailed what their testimony has been in the written statement. They include Senator Harry Reid, Senator Howard Cannon, also of Nevada, a guy named Al O'Donnell, who was the first general manager of EG&G in Nevada, which managed the Nevada test site, which blew up hundreds of nuclear weapons. There's a guy named Dr. James Lakatsky, who was a career scientist with the Defense Intelligence Agency, who was the guy who initiated a program called OSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, which is, as far as we know, the largest acknowledged UFO program ever funded by the U.S. government, which put together an amazing pile of information that members of this committee and the world, most of which they have never seen. The DIA still hasn't released 95% of what was prepared by that program at a cost of millions and millions of dollars. The one name I do want to bring up in this session, though, is Robert Bigelow. So looking into the idea of crash retrievals and reverse engineering, while OSAP, that program, was active, the DIA's contractor, Robert Bigelow of Las Vegas, made a bold attempt to acquire physical proof of UFO crashes. It's been widely reported and suspected that Lockheed Martin is one of the contractors, the defense contractors, that has held this stuff, stored it away in secrecy, and tried to figure out how it works. I have confirmed on the record that Robert Bigelow and a trusted colleague from OSAP met with and negotiated with senior executives at Lockheed Martin and hammered out a deal wherein Bigelow's company, Bass, would receive a quantity of unusual material that had been stashed away and protected at a facility in California. That material was not made here. I want to move on now to the Russia files, because that was going to be sort of the central impetus of what I was going to talk to you about today. Back in the early 90s, I got into Russia, met with a number of their defense officials, Ministry of Defense and others, who confirmed for me that Russia had been doing the same thing that the United States had been doing, that is, secretly studying UFOs while publicly saying something completely different. The documents and interviews that I obtained and have now shared with this task force show that the USSR launched what is almost certainly the largest UFO UAP investigation in the world. The first phase of that was an order was sent out to the entire USSR military empire that every unit, you see anything strange in the sky, a craft, an orb, something unusual, you had to gather all the evidence, collect testimony from the witnesses, look for physical evidence, and all of that information went into one program at the Ministry of Defense. Thousands and thousands of these reports came in. A lot of them were first routed to the KGB, but then back to another program that came after this collection effort called Thread 3. And Thread 3 was an analysis program. We have provided to the committee the documents of what they were trying to do, and essentially they were trying to build their own UFOs. They were using the information from their observations and studies to try to figure out the technology. The guy who was in charge of that program, Colonel Boris Sokolov, told me that their goal was to basically develop technology that would be superior to anything we had, based on what they learned from UFOs. There was an incident in October of 1982 over at ICBM base where UFOs popped up, was observed over this base where the missiles are pointed at us, United States. These UFOs perform incredible maneuvers. They split apart, they fuse back together, they'd appear and disappear, and right at the end of this 4-hour period, the launch control codes for the ICBMs lit up. Something entered the correct codes. The missiles were fired up and ready to launch, and they could not shut it down. The Russian officers were panicking. The UFOs they disappeared. The launch control system goes back to normal. Colonel Sokolov and his team came in, took the thing apart, could not figure out what it was. It wasn't a power surge or EMPs or some of the baloney excuses that our country has given for similar events involving our nuclear missiles. They thought it was a message from wherever the UFOs were from. And that's a chilling thing. I mean, we were a couple of seconds away from World War III starting, and the UFOs were responsible for it.
I want to cue up a video that I've been given. And as before it starts, I'm going to describe, this was taken October 30th of 2024. This video is of an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb, or this object, off the coast of Yemen. You'll see that another MQ-9 launched a Hellfire missile. That you cannot see that drone. And so I'm not going to explain it to you. You'll see exactly what it does. This is when it zoomed out, so you can still see it traveling. So, Mr. Knapp, have you heard about events like this occurring?
There are servers where there's a whole bank of these kind of videos that Congress has not been allowed to see, that the public hasn't been allowed to see, occasionally some of that stuff gets out in the wild and it comes our way, it should be going to you. You know, the public should be seeing this stuff. And why you're not allowed to, I don't know. But that's a Hellfire missile smacking into that UFO and just bounced right off. And it kept going.
It kept going, and it looks like the debris was taken with it.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
So
what flies like that?
Again, I'm not going to speculate what it is, but the question is, you know, why are we being blocked from this information? And you had you reported James Lakatsky came to you with government possession of NHI craft and how they ultimately gained entry. Can you testify to the veracity of that claim?
Dr. Lakatsky is an honorable man who served most of his career with the DIA, a very trusted, high-level rocket scientist and intelligence analyst who inspired the OSAP program, as I said earlier. And in full disclosure, I've co-written 2 books with him. He dropped this on myself and our other co-author out of the blue. And it took 14 months for us to get DOPSR approval for him to release 2 sentences on that. He said this craft, we had managed to get inside of it. It had no wings, no rotor, no tail. It had no fuel tanks. They didn't know how it flew or how it was operated. It clearly looked like it was aerodynamic, but he would not go further. He's a by-the-book guy, and until he gets clearance to say more about that, I don't think we're going to hear much more. But it's not ours. It wasn't ours. We didn't make it. We didn't know who made it and how it was built and how it operated. We've got at least one, and I don't know. I think that's enough confirmation that we do have recovered discs and material.